Joining us now is Nomiki Konst, a reporter for the Young Turks, a Bernie Sanders surrogate, and a DNC Unity Commission member. We're talking to Nomi now, who is now starring in a little bit of viral video gold that you may have seen on Twitter or the internets of
viral videos.
Spitting hot fire and truth to the DNC Unity Commission and cursing on C-SPAN.
And you know what? I did go through FEC filings. And it doesn't look good. It smells. We're talking about close to $700 to $800 million between the joint fundraising agreement and the DNC being spent on 5 consultants. Uh-oh. This is not a public outrage issue. The DNC chairs are upset, and that is our fault because we have put that money to the top 5 consultants. And part of that has to go to the conflicts of interests. This is outrageous. It's unethical. It's bad governance. And frankly, it's fucking, corruption.
Have you been fined by the FCC yet, Nomi?
So far, I haven't received any fines.
Okay. I mean, fined for truth. That's you. Please change your handle accordingly. But Nomi, I mean, we'll get into like the clip itself, but just to start with, could you give us the background on what led you to be giving this speech at this commission? To start off with, what is the DNC Unity Commission, and how did you find yourself on it?
It's really wonky, and that's why I'm actually quite shocked that this video is going viral, because I've been saying this stuff for a long time, and no one pays attention to process usually. The commission was born out of the convention between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders when Bernie decided to give all of the delegate votes to Secretary Clinton. That required a lot of work. People went to the convention. They raised money. They shared hotel rooms. They ran for delegates. They could go there and fight it out. And, it was pretty clear at that point that he was not going to win the nomination. So there wasn't going to be a floor fight. I mean, they could have technically had a fight over the superdelegates and some of the other stuff.
So this was this came out of the convention. This was a condition of Bernie letting Hillary be nominated by acclamation.
Exactly, and the condition was we create this. They create this commission, and we talk about the problems in the primary. Which at that point, you'd be a fool if you couldn't even recognize it. Of course, the internet says other things, and the little Neera Tanden and Joy Reid will say their thing on the internet. But the truth is, most of the people in the campaign were cognizant of the factors that made the left, meaning the Bernie side, upset. Superdelegates were something that they fought against under Obama. So they created this commission, and they made a very, very clear mandate in the commission that the superdelegates would absolutely be reduced. And we knew going into the commission that there would definitely be movement on superdelegates. And then we also dealt with primaries and caucuses and party reform. So there are 4 different categories.
Just real quick, though. Sorry, Nomi, but for people who let's just be clear there. Remind us again. What are the superdelegates, and why are they? Why was this make the Bernie or the left of the Democratic Party so angry?
So superdelegates were founded in the early '80s. They kind of came about and grew through several past commissions. Initially, superdelegates were there as sort of a mechanism to prevent another McGovern from happening. If you remember, McGovern lost bigly. There was a map of I can't remember how many states. You guys?
It was Massachusetts, I think, was one of 2 that voted for
Mass
McGovern.
and DC.
Yeah,
right. It was pretty bad. So superdelegates were this mechanism where elected officials could essentially be the security net. In case a McGovern happened again, that they could, put their vote out in the primary on the floor of the convention and make sure that more of an insider who was vetted, as they said, would be the nominee. And I mean, one of our commission members, Elaine Kmark, who got some internet grief, but she's actually not as bad as they're saying on the internet. She's very thoughtful and smart, but she was one of the people who designed superdelegates. So she was very passionate about keeping superdelegates because she didn't want another McGovern. And I remember in one of the commission meetings, I said to her, what's your fear of another McGovern? The loss? And she says, yes. And I said, well, I mean, wasn't last year that McGovern?
Wah, wah.
So
She didn't really get it.
So, and of course, last year, the superdelegates, right out the gate, Hillary Clinton, when she announced her campaign, she had no opposition at that time. She came out of the gate with a large number of superdelegates, which was always in the delegate counts held over Bernie's head, even before a single vote was cast.
Yeah, and what drove me crazy last year was I would go on, this was before I was at TYT and I was doing like CNN and MSNBC and yes, sometimes Fox News. They would put these delegate counts up and they would mix them together, not understanding that superdelegates weren't supposed to declare until the convention,
Right,
or after the nominee had been chosen by the delegate process. But
they're legally unpledged up to that point.
exactly, it was just sort of like an inherent like rule, but not. It wasn't a written rule. If that makes sense, you were supposed to act in good interest, but over time, I mean, especially the last two big presidential contests, these superdelegates, especially the elected officials, feel like it's a privilege and an honor and they deserve the right. And that's really where the fight happened over the past several months for those who are on the superdelegate committee was how do we eliminate as many as possible and then essentially don't strip the dignitaries from their title, but have them bound to the vote of the people. And Nina Turner and myself were the only ones to vote. I mean, we did it purposely. We weren't trying to throw it under the bus, but we were the only ones who voted against the resolution because it didn't go far enough. It didn't eliminate all superdelegates.
Can I suggest that if you want to strip them of their actual power, but still give them a sense of being, important party grandees? Can I suggest maybe a T-shirt or pin that just says "I'm super"?
I would be all for that.
But back to this idea of like the Unity Commission, right? So like this was essentially something that was conceded to because Bernie pledged all of his delegates to Clinton at the Democratic Convention. And out of this, there was the promise that there would be a DNC Unity Commission to reform some of these rules that governed the DNC and the Democratic primary process.
That's exactly it. And Hillary Clinton got to nominate 9 members. Bernie, because he didn't win, got to nominate 7 members. And then at the time, they didn't know who the chairman was going to be, the new chairperson, but they had 3. And then soon after Tom Perez, quote, won the election, he was able to nominate 3 members. And so, we were going in knowing that we were going to be the underdogs, but we're also pains in the asses. And and there were a lot of I don't know if we were doing everything strategically, but it all I think worked out in the end for the commission, and it was just really hard for them. And a lot of it had to do with, frankly, Donna Brazile, and I'm very grateful for that.
Can you describe what the final commission's recommendations were?
Sure. So, some of them are really nuanced, and you don't want to get into the details of, but the big ones were the reduction of superdelegates and binding the remainder of superdelegates to the will of the people on the first ballot. Okay. I can't think of going to a second ballot anytime in the last 40 years, so it most likely won't be an issue. But it was reduced by, I believe, over 500. So it's just the elected officials and former presidents who are left. And then we went into primaries, and this was great because I'm from New York and I'm very, very active in New York. Woohoo! Yeah, in New York, where I'm not right now.
Welcome here.
But you guys know, I mean, you've covered this before, where the New York Democratic primary is a joke.
Disgusting. Absolutely true. It was probably the least democratic thing I saw, the most insulting thing that I saw Hillary Clinton supporters stand for in the last election.
And I think what's interesting about that is, the dynamics in New York right now have shifted so much. There's so many people who supported Hillary Clinton who understand, because it's a progressive state, that they need the progressive activists to support them, meaning elected officials. And so what we've seen in the last year is state senators and assemblymen and congressmen and, Kirsten Gillibrand, the senator, the U.S. senator, they've really started to align more with the Bernie wing and support a lot of our reform efforts, including same-day registration, not putting all the deadlines, moving the deadlines up to 60 days out, meaning whatever the earliest, the deadline closest to the actual election, all of the deadlines need to be on that same day. So we made that recommendation for all states. all state parties, and they have sort of a carrot and stick philosophy, meaning, if you're a Democratic state, it's different than if you're in a Republican state because there's a Republican legislature. But in New York in particular, what we learned, because it's such a bad actor, we had the Board of Elections executive director make a presentation to us, and he disclosed that moving the deadlines is actually up to the New York State Democratic Party. And if anybody knows anything about New York, this New York State Democratic Party is controlled by Andrew Cuomo, who is also enabling the Senate from being held by Democrats right now. He's a snake, total snake. So that was a good thing. We're going to be pressuring them. And then caucuses.
Right.
So I don't know how many of you have really been following the internet chatter about this commission, but there were some smears written by Daily Kost's authors, whatever they are, like
Armando?
Commentators.
The eye guy, as I call him.
Eyeball man.
Who's the Daily Kos guy whose Avi looks like he just has jaundice or something?
Yeah, he looks like he was looking through a peephole that was made out of a repurposed urinal that no one cleaned. Holy shit, Armando. Get that thing looked at, buddy.
Yeah, he doesn't like me either. So thank you for beating up on him. He wrote this horrible Daily Kos article in, I think, June, after one of our commission meetings, where somebody came and we had presenters, people who testified on caucuses, the good ones, the bad ones, the problems, so we can fix them and reform them. And he started this lie saying that we were trying to eliminate primaries and replace them with caucuses, when they're literally separate categories. And then he made it about racism, saying that caucuses are inherently racist and that we're trying to, the Bernie Sanders side is trying to, spread a white agenda so he can win in I don't know what a white agenda is, but, win in 2020. It was just crap.
Continue listening to our show to find out.
So that was an area that got a little heated, but for the most part, except for a couple of little hiccups, caucuses have incredible reforms that we've pushed. I mean, the interesting thing about caucuses is that at a time when Democrats don't control like most of the map, any legislatures for the most part, in states where caucuses are run, especially red states, it gives the Democratic Party the ability to control their election in terms of primaries. So if you're in a red state, Democrats don't control the primary. But in a caucus, they're completely in control of it. So, Jane Klebb, who's from Nebraska, is on our commission with us. She's a big fan of caucuses. She runs the Nebraska Democratic Party, and she was a great, she's on our side, but she stood her ground and she fought. And as a result, we made some incredible reforms for caucuses.
No, wait, correct me if I'm wrong, but those state parties, they pay for their own caucuses, right? That's the reason why they've got that independence?
Yes, they pay for their own caucuses. If the DNC, which we'll get to, was more financially solvent and responsible with their finances.
Yeah, I want to get to that, actually. I mean, one other thing that got heated. Now I want to speak to your comments specifically in the video that people are watching. You're speaking about the issue of the DNC's budget and its transparency, or rather lack thereof. Can you explain what led to those comments and break down what you were saying? Yeah,
so I thought probably at that moment still that we would not have any progress on the budget. And I knew that I could not be on this commission and not fight hard on this. And this really came out of the DNC chair's race when Vice Chairman Ray Buckley, who's the New Hampshire Democratic Party chair, he was running for chair against Tom Perez, and he got on stage and said, I've never seen the budget. I'm an officer of the Democratic Party. I have no idea where the money's going. And there were gasps in the audience from DNC members. And so I started researching this and talking to Ray and a lot of other folks in the party, and learning a lot about how the finances of the Democratic Party were really controlled by either the chair or just the executive director and the treasurer. And there was no transparency. There's no accountability. And I researched, where the money was being spent by looking through FEC filings and hearing from DNC state chairs and hearing them say things like they only had a couple of $1,000s. Some had more. They had to go out there and raise money on their own, but they didn't have vibrant state parties. And I think that's the direct result is you lose state legislatures.
One of the things,
if you want to find out that budget in the DNC basement, you need to call this guy Dinesh D'Souza.
he can get you the files. He can get you access.
He can get you.
He can get you access to the documents.
It's in a big box labeled budget next to the box labeled Sharia law next to the box labeled Marxist plot.
Well, no, I mean, one of the things you mentioned, right? Like, we're dealing in a time now where, like, the Democratic Party controls almost, like, no state legislatures. The state parties have been almost eviscerated in terms of, like, money and, like, getting anything done. And one of the things you mentioned, if you look at where this money's going, is this issue of consultants. And you say, like, in the clip right before or after, I think you dropped the F-bomb, you say that this is corruption. Could you talk a little bit about, like, how this idea of consultants and why all this money is being spent on them and why that is in its own way corrupt?
Yeah. So the Democratic Party under the leadership of Obama was pretty much devastated. It's an empty vessel that I believe is just a vessel that funnels money. And the problem really came out of it becoming an institution that just fundraises for the president, and they ignored every race in between. And so I think after the first shellacking, the Democrats said, oh, maybe we should restructure this and, take OFA and just bring it completely into the DNC, not put like a wall in the middle of the DNC for OFA and the DNC. Maybe we should actually, go out there and help state parties and fund state parties. But when you have consultants that are DNC members, voting members, and when you have consultants who are kind of coming in and out of the DNC, they're the ones who are going to push for the funding all to go to the presidential races because that's where all the money is. It's, every 4 years you run $1 billion campaign, and a lot of it is media buys. So these consultants,
but what do these consultants do? Like, what are their services that are being paid for here?
Losing elections, number one. They fail up really well.
Because this is one of the things that when we talked about Donna Brazil's book, this is one of the points she brings up about the problems of the DNC was the issue of these consultants, and particularly the people Debbie Washing Machine Schultz was hiring.
I call her Debbie Laundering Machine.
Yeah. Oh wait, working on the commission, did you get a chance to work with Donna Brazil or talk to her at all?
I did actually.
What about Dolores?
Yes. What about Dolores?
She so I actually interviewed her last week on Friday on TYT, and so if anybody wants to check that out, it's an hour-long interview. But I spent the morning with her and part of the afternoon, and we really, in preparation for the interview, but also I've learned a lot through the commission. I've learned a lot before that, and I read her book, and it validated a lot of my beliefs and the research I had done, which I knew was right, but when you read it from a former chairwoman, and I knew what it took for her to come out there and say these things, she could have written a book on anything, honestly, and she would have gotten attention. She did not need to throw these people under the bus, and she did. And it was very courageous, and I can guarantee you that a lot of the reforms on the party reform side of this commission, meaning the budgetary stuff and the consultant stuff, would not have happened had it not been for Donna Brazil stepping up and saying these things.
Donna and Dolores making it happen.
So, Nomi, going back to the electoral reforms, as I understand it, the top line issues are absentee ballots for caucuses, which is great, open primary recommendation and same-day registration for states that have primaries. Is that correct?
We don't say open primary. It's basically primary reform, meaning ways for parties to be more to make it more accessible to vote.
Right.
And more inclusive.
But that's a non-binding recommendation that state by state has to be implemented. Is that right?
Exactly. Yeah. But, there are some sort of factors that we can do to help those states do so, depending on the state.
But the superdelegate reform, now that one's huge, and if they're bound to the first ballot, that means in virtually all cases, superdelegates just won't be a factor going forward.
Absolutely.
And but these reforms to go through still have to go to a vote in the DNC at large. Is that correct?
First, it has to go to the Rules and Bylaws Committee. My God, this is so wonky. And then it has to go to the DNC membership at large, which is over 400 members.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the prospects are for passing it with the membership at large?
Well, I think, and to go back to, I mean, I was on party reform committee, so that's why I'm very passionate about that stuff. But I think you'd ask anybody on the commission, at least on our side, whether or not we would have gotten the conflicts of interest ban passed, or the ability to have any contractor or vendor or expenditure over $100,000 has to be approved by, the budget committee and DNC officers. That wouldn't have, that stuff really, I didn't think that was going to get passed. And I think that most of people on our side didn't think it was going to get passed. They thought that the caucus reform, the primary reform, and the superdelegate reform would be passed. Well, superdelegates, of course, because it was a mandate. So my concern is still that when we go before rules and bylaws, some of the party reform stuff won't be passed. And that's why it's really important that the right people put pressure on the Rules and Bylaws Committee, because we don't have members on the Rules and Bylaws Committee. Tom Perez put 5 of our commissioners that were on Hillary Clinton's side and his side on the Rules and Bylaws Committee, but not one of us, which is inherently problematic. And nobody, except for Donna Brazil, in a funny turn of events, is on the Rules and Bylaws Committee to back us up.
Obviously, unity is what everyone's talking about and what we'll still be talking about going into the midterm elections. When do these votes happen? I mean, when do you anticipate the final vote by the DNC at large on this package of reforms being? Before or after the midterms is, I guess, what I'd really like to know.
So it'll probably be before the midterms. They don't have the dates yet, but they do 2 meetings a year. The first one is going to be most likely in February. That's where the Rules and Bylaws Committee is going to meet. And then probably like 6 months later, they'll have it in the fall. Like, we just had our fall meeting in Vegas like a month and a half ago. And then the last meeting before that was in February, the end of February, when the DNC chair's race happened. Right. So, it's a long period of time. And you know what I think, in terms of the party stuff, Chairman Perez can actually do some of this stuff on his own. He doesn't have to wait for the reforms to be passed. And I think that's why it's important that DNC members who really do, I said this in my little rant, this isn't just about like the grassroots anymore. The DNC membership, who are like the most insidery people you can imagine, and DNC chairs and like the officers, they're angry and they want a lot of these reforms because they've committed their lives. They spend most of their time trying to fix the party. And they are really mad that some consultants who, as I said in the piece, wanted their 3rd, 4th, and 5th homes have really made their work a lot harder.
Well, in my mind, what matters here is that I think this is it's a small step, but it's an important package of reforms that will go a long way to, I think, regaining trust among leftist voters in the Democratic Party. And I think that what's vital is that the anti-capitalist left and the progressive left that still views the Democratic Party as a feasible electoral vehicle would apply pressure to accomplish these reforms and make clear that that's a threat, because if you want a united front in 2018 and then going forward, the next presidential primary can't be a sham.
Exactly. And, if there was a viable third-party option, I don't even know if all of our commissioners would be in that room.
I think if these reforms, these very basic and I think non-controversial reforms don't go through, I think that drumbeat to a third party will grow louder.
One last thing, Nomi. Speaking of this Unity Commission and these reforms being offered or voted on right now, I just want to bring up one more time. If it wasn't Armando, it was one of the other big cost diarists said that these reforms and everything Donna Brazil has done since the election are all intended to rig the Democratic primary for Bernie Sanders in 2020. So can you just confirm for us right here and now that that is indeed what you're doing?
I think that was, if I'm right, that was Matthew Chapman, another one that I was like, who is this person?
That's Chappie.
because if that's not what you're doing, can I suggest that you should be?
I don't think that Bernie Sanders or any of us even know how to think that far in advance to rig anything. We're not even like strategic on our phone calls.
Well, I think people are starting to think of it that way because we all saw a great meme the other day that was somebody saying, when the Bernie bros expect Hillary Clinton to endorse Bernie in 2020 and do speeches for him, and then like a rolling eye fucking animation or something. So in my mind, it seems they're so depressed that they think he'll be the nominee, which is cool.
But I also, what I want to remind everyone is, and I'm on Twitter all the time. It is a minority, and I know that they can get picked up and can go on TV, and it can become problematic. I will point to the Kamala Harris quote I made in a Mike article earlier this year that turned into a PR nightmare. But with that being said, for the most part, no one on the commission listened to it. They didn't care. And the people on the outside clearly weren't even watching the commission because they didn't realize that their own people were working with us on these reforms that they were against. So, this is a noisy faction. Some of them have a much larger platform and megaphone and maybe even a budget like Neera Tanden does. But the reality is that they didn't influence what we did over the last year, and they were trying very, very hard to do so. So they're pains in the asses, but they're small.
Okay. Nomiki Konst, thank you so much for your time and for joining us to talk about this.
Also, thank you so much for your work on the commission, and I was really pleased to read what came out of that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you, Nomiki.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Okay, we are back. I guess for the second half of the show, I'd like to switch directions now from what we just talked about with Nomiki to something that I don't know. I mean, this one it's hard to segue into because it's so fucked up, but I feel nonetheless obligated that we really do have to talk about this because it was probably the thing that was most in the front of my mind all week long. And I'm talking, of course, about this video and of Daniel Shaver, this guy being killed in a hotel hallway by a police officer with his own personal AR-15, and then his subsequent acquittal this week.
Yeah, which is interesting. This has been a year since this happened.
This happened in 2016.
And they suppressed the video until the day he was acquitted. Basically, I honestly think at this point there's an understanding in the people in power that basically there's a limited amount of time after something happens where people can absorb it or move on. And if that video had been known for a long time, like the Rodney King video had been, and then after people had heard about it and thought about it, it turned into, well, what's this going to mean? And then he got acquitted, I think you would have had much bigger protests, much more of a big national hoopla. But because you say at the same time, this happened and he was acquitted, well, where does the energy go?
Well, yeah, did the jury see the video?
Yes, they saw the video. They did not get to find out that this fucking little dipshit, this fucking Ed Hardy ass fucking manlet with shitty tribal tats who looked like fucking Brandon Wardell with a fucking Fragile X syndrome.
What if a cop blasted civilians?
But he had an AR-15 that he had personally paid to have engraved with the words "You're fucked."
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
I mean, so this was, I think, the video itself and the ensuing cover-up was sort of similar to another police shooting in the last few years, the Laquan McDonald shooting in Chicago that Rahm Emanuel famously covered up during his election against Joey Garcia, where he probably would have lost. I mean, Cook County is a place with sometimes very low voter engagement because people correctly assume that the fix is in and there's really nothing you can do against the horrible sons and daughters of Daley's personal shabiha that the CPD started off as. But it was the same sort of thing. I mean, it's that there is an unfortunate truth in this that the Shaver shooting is going to ultimately get more outcry from people because it is a white guy versus Laquan McDonald, a black teenager. But they're both just horrifying spectacles where the person is not presenting any threat, and in Shaver's case, literally begging for his life. And
hold on a minute, though, guys. He was begging for his life, but while the cop was demanding that he crawl towards him for some reason that makes no fucking sense, since he was on the ground, they could have put cuffs on him at any time. Instead, they decided to do this deadly hokey pokey with him. Okay. And then while he's crawling on the ground, he reaches back to pull up his shorts. That's fear.
That ended his life. Yeah,
you got to do it.
To me, the video is one of the worst fucking things I've ever seen. It's indescribable, and the worst part about it is this, as you said, this indecipherable list of just commands that they're barking at this bewildered, terrified man who, again, is completely incapacitated, lying face down on the ground with his hands out.
Okay, young man, listen to my instructions and do not make a mistake. You are to keep your legs crossed. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. You are to put both of your hands palm down, straight out in front of you. Push yourself up to a kneeling position. I said, keep your legs crossed! I didn't say there's a conversation. Put your hair! Hands up in the air!
And they're like, no, like crawl forward. No, slower.
Yeah.
Left hand behind right shoulder.
Yeah.
Like,
Cross your knee. Like that one point, he uncrossed his ankles, and the guy lost it. Shit, like he pulled a fucking gun out. But no, cross your ankles. Like, what do you think he's doing? Does he got the fucking 007 stabby foot shoe?
This is every single one of these fucking pussies. I mean, people always go, well, do you think, most cops don't just charge their firearms? And that's fucking stupid because all of them, the ones that don't, end up covering for guys like this. But they get into it so they can tell somebody what to do. That guy's dream, he played fucking Rainbow Six or some shit when he was just a pimply-faced teenager like we all were, but he internalized whatever lessons from his life to mean that one day he could bark those commands at the end of a weapon, and because it would be just some fucking father of two muling on the ground, that he could say whatever he wants, he would get no consequence, and if he killed him on fucking Periscope and got the hearts going, nothing would happen to him. They love the fucking the militarization of cops. I mean, it's about equipment and it's about things, what fucking Bradley fighting vehicles and F-22s they get to, apprehend teenagers that are loitering in an abandoned Home Depot drinking Mad Dog. But it's also about their persona. That training reflects on them. And they love to hear themselves say those like polysyllabic military words. Triangulate your position, sir. You are perpendicular to the ground. I need you in a...
We were making an optical assessment.
We need you in a fire negative scenario. And I mean,
do not turn this op kinetic by reaching for your shorts.
I mean, yeah, every fucking cop, like, who's joined the force in like the last decade with those like sort of I go to the gym 2 times a week biceps and fucking Jax Teller's barber tattoos. They all have that fantasy that they thought they could have been Green Berets, but they had like a prehensile tail or something.
What happened was, okay, so the guy was in a hotel and he was showing to his friends a pellet gun that he used in his job as an exterminator.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, someone called the cops because they saw someone with a gun through a window, right?
Yeah.
Arizona, this took place in Arizona, an open carry state, right? So where you go for that? And then the one thing that I haven't figured out in any of the news accounts was why this cop had his own personal AR-15 with him while he was on duty.
Apparently, this is a thing. The police officer who was recently acquitted of another incredibly suspicious-looking shooting, where it appears as though he's planting a gun on the fucking person. The killing that he committed was when he shot the guy, he was dual wielding.
Like John Woo.
Fucking John Woo movie style. He had a service pistol in one hand and his own AK-47 that he bought for his personal use in his other hand. He was one-handing an assault rifle and he had a fucking pistol in the other when he went to confront a suspect. That's what they do now.
Yeah, I mean, there is, again, of course, there is precedent in this in Chicago. Like, there's a grim competition that goes on with people where we argue whether NYPD or LAPD or CPD is the worst. But as a native Chicagoan, I think they're the worst. And they have the special forces unit of cops who could supply their own firearms, and they would get just fucking fully automatic weapons that were purposed to perforate a fucking marketplace in Baghdad. And what happened is, of course, they just murked a lot of people in situations like this, but they also ended up running themselves like a private protection racket and extorted drug dealers because it turns out like the less oversight you give these guys and the more you tell them that they're warriors, they're just going to behave like fucking soldiers of fortune, like those guys, or like this fucking asshole, or like Darren Wilson. They're going to act like colonial troops. They're going to act like they're in the fucking
Well, that's the
Boer
thing.
War.
And anybody who is taken aback by this, who in any way before this or still uses this as a way to sort of minimize Black Lives Matter and racial, awareness as the cause of this, saying, aha, this proves that racism isn't the issue because, this guy was white too. But they're all built, it's all connected to the same basic phenomena, which is the police are an occupying force in black communities. And that's been the case since the end of slavery because the police in America evolved to maintain a racial underclass. And that creates mindset, that creates policies, that creates a method of dealing with citizens and a way of thinking about citizens that's going to bleed over. They're not just going to be able to segregate that mindset to the underclass that it was explicitly aimed towards. It's going to be anybody that they see in their line of work. Anybody is going to be that potential threat, that potential insurgent who must be dominated and who must show respect to me and basically isn't a human being.
I would say everyone except the wealthy and powerful.
Well, of course. Yeah, no, the less money you have, the more vulnerable you are to their violence.
LAPD's not going to the Palisades
no.
with SWAT teams.
It's like the money, it's like you have a bulletproof, like you have a bullet and like stun gun and mace proof vest, and it's just, instead of Kevlar, it's just stacks of cash. And the more stacks of cash you are, the harder it is to feel anything from the police state.
There is a phenomenon that happens in men, and it happens a lot in America because we don't really have a physical fighting culture compared to like a lot of other countries, where men grow up and they have a subconscious fear of being dominated by another man in a fight, and it's a fear that animates them, and when they get drunk it makes them act like assholes because they wonder, is this going to be the time that I'm humiliated worse than anything? The worst thing that can happen to me is that I lose a fight. And they'll try to out alpha other guys or just try to intimidate them and just generally act like assholes. But of course, because we're a nation built on slavery and genocide, it's racialized. So the worst thing that can happen to them is to be humiliated in this almost sexual way by a black person or anyone. But, of course, with the Shaver shooting, it does extend to everyone. They do have that fear more towards people of color. But I forgot who said it. It may have been you, Matt, where it was like, well, this shows that there is two cops and their defenders, that there is an acceptable amount of violence dealt out to even white people.
Yes.
That is worth the cost of them occupying black communities.
T actually made a friend of the show. T made a good point about this on Twitter today, where he was like, like using this as an example, it'd be like, oh, well, it's not just black people that cops do this to. This is everyone. It's almost like they need a few white victims to make it to justify the fact that it isn't just purely targeted
and also to warn everybody, fuck with us, and this is what you get. I mean, I'm starting to think that because there's been a moderate push for body cameras, right, for cops to reduce violence, and then there's a radical argument that's bullshit. Don't do it.
That's the correct argument, by the way.
Because it's just a panacea. But it's not just something that's ineffective, and it's not just something that's reactionary because it's more of a surveillance thing. I honestly think at this point, every one of these tapes that comes out, has a positive salutary effect for the fucking cops, because it basically announces to everybody, this is what we can do to you, and none of us will ever get in trouble for it.
Yeah,
and then they can carry on the people who they have to see every day, have that in their head that we can do that.
Yeah,
and we will walk.
And I think that all of these tapes of police initiated murders normalize that idea among people who aren't the police, to say, oh, that's just the way things are. The police kill people. Nothing happens. We never organize. There's no politicians won't do anything to change it.
Two points about this that I was thinking about. First and foremost, this jury had the opportunity to convict this guy of second-degree murder, and had the opportunity. They didn't do that. They had the option to convict him of reckless manslaughter. They did neither.
I mean,
who are these people?
How do you not have one guy there, one person who has a human response to that fucking video?
Well, watch that video
and is able to like bargain them down to like a guy, like a kind of a Henry Fonda guy, only in reverse, who's saying no. We can't we at least? I'm not going to sign off on letting this guy go. You will not sign off on murder. we can walk out of this room if you agree to go with manslaughter as a compromise position. Not a single person
Not a
on
single
that
one
jury.
forced a hung jury.
Well, I think that one of the overlooked consequences of our imperialism, and especially our post 9/11 imperialism, is, we all make fun of like very obvious propaganda, like that movie Act of Valor, where it was like real Navy SEALs going like, "We need to complete the op," but the propaganda campaign in America around imperialism, and especially after 9/11, where it's everything from shows like 24 to shit like Zero Dark 30, where all people in these cool outfits are portrayed as completely moral, stoic forces that always know what to do, and they're always defending you, and they will risk anything to do it, and they always say the cool thing, and they do the right thing, and they're always in the right place at the right time. It has the consequences of it is that it has made the average person even more sort of passively fascist in this way, because they see that cop or they see any cop and they go, well, that's kind of like Claire Danes in Homeland.
This gets to the second thing I wanted to bring up, which is, what's it going to take to have any political representation in this country to just be like, we're against cops, or just like, not like we're against law enforcement, but like we're just like just come out against like the police as they currently act and behave. Because like, you're right, since 9/11, like there has been this conflation of like the police and troops, and I think that's why they're allowed to get away with so much thing. But I gotta say, I'm skeptical of this notion that like that this would be a losing message, because I really don't think average people like cops.
Average people don't like cops, but when I think put in the position and given put in a jury and put in the confines of courtroom, I mean, those things, like an HR department is designed to protect a company, a courtroom, our legal system is ultimately designed to protect
Let me say this
cops.
a different way. Like, I'm not saying like the Democrats need to come out and be like, we are the the kill pigs.
Hillary
the world
Clinton-
is a
Hillary
fuck, a million dead cops.
Hillary Clinton comes out there and she goes, I just love Chris Dorner. He's great. We need to bring him back from the dead. People have called me a white Dorner. Shout out to Dank Metal.
Did we make a joke early on where Bernie was like, I think we need a white donor?
That was Dank Metal.
Okay, Dank Metal. Okay. I'm sorry. Let me finish my point though. It's like, they're not going to become like we're the dead cops part, the cop guts party. But like, why isn't like any or all Democratic why can any political party make an issue out of that video and say no? This is an absolute. I'm sorry. This is an absolute travesty.
Oh, it should be run as commercials.
And you think you could peel off libertarian dipshits with this, right? You could like a Rand Paul Constitution guy. He should look at that and be horrified. If he's not totally
they are
absorbed.
horrified. And actually, you know what? A lot of people on the right are talking about this video because they see an opportunity. They're saying like, okay, well, A, it's a white guy, but B, like this is the jackbooted like state, killing you and shooting you, like libertarians and like people on the right. Like I said, they have good reason to be angry about like this shit, and they're going to make hay out of it.
I don't know. I don't know because it's not the most salient issue for them. I'll say this. People's perceptions of the police depend on a lot of things.
Mostly, it's how many times they've interacted with them.
Right,
100%, 100%.
No, that's true. That's a fact.
There's that. There's also, but it's also obviously colored by your racial perception, your perception of crime generally, and as well your socioeconomic stakes.
Right. If you think the cops are there to protect you from scary black people and brown people, then you will have an instinctive sympathy for them and feel the fear that they are claiming to feel when they have to pull a trigger.
Right. Especially if you're a small business owner, if you have some kind of property.
How stupid does that Michael Slager guy feel for fucking pleading guilty? The guy who shot Walter Scott. It's like, that was a bad video, but I mean, it's got the racial element to help him.
5 times in the back,
and then dropped a gun on him. But he had a fucking mistrial in the state case before he pled guilty. There was a guy in Cincinnati who was also filmed shooting a black guy, and he Ray Tenzing. They've tried him twice, 2 fucking mistrials, and that was only because they had Cincinnati jury pool, which meant they had mixed juries both times. But all the white people on both juries, they were never going to convict him.
My optimistic feeling with all like the cops getting off like this is that one day we may kind of look back at it in the same way that we looked at like Klan members getting off in like state cases in places like Mississippi.
We're going to think of those videos as those old postcards from lynchings that people would send out.
And that maybe we get this standard for like the same thing that like civil rights prosecutions were for those. But the thing is, like, people in federal cases get off. And also there's no impetus for the federal government, the Justice Department especially, to do that because the FBI loves doing this shit too. I mean, it wasn't videotape, but that Todashayev shooting.
Oh,
the
man.
Oh, yeah.
That is still
They do
very
that shit all the
puzzling.
time. Ruby Ridge, this is just what law enforcement officers do because they're essentially fucking scared people. A combination of pure fear and a yellow streak running down their fucking soul and an authoritarian desire to tell people what to do and to have people fucking fear them.
Fear is, they need to, they're responding to fear. And what does the body do when it is frightened? It has a fight and flight response, right? And the white fear generated by black people seeking agency in America in the 20th century created the fight and flight of literal white flight, as in leaving, as in packing up and moving to a different neighborhood. And the fight is putting on a gun and coming back into the city and showing you're not going to be afraid by fucking killing people and by demanding respect from people who you're deeply, deeply terrified of.
Well, I mean, in the same way that like shows like 24 and everything imparted that imperialist mindset on like a lot of the average people you see, the types of people who will let guys like this walk. 1970s had a great effect too. All the crime wave movies, fucking Dirty Harry, Death Wish, because it's all about an average, the same type of thing, an average stoic guy who will toss off a few like wry one-liners and always is in the right place and knows the right thing to say, except instead of fighting against hated faceless Arabs in another country or Pashtuns or it's someone going into the heart of darkness and instilling fear in these roving, faceless urban gangs.
I mean, back to this idea of fear. I mean, I think one of the main reasons like it's so hard to get a guilty verdict in any of these things is because, as you said, like the court system is so like the instructions given to juries basically means that if a cop can create the idea that like there was any kind of even a shred of reasonable idea that like, oh, I was afraid for my life.
Yeah.
Then it's justified.
Yeah. You're basically, I mean, you're in the position, if you're prosecuting a cop in one of these things, of proving a negative. You have to prove that they weren't scared.
Yeah.
And that's impossible,
Except for that fucking video. How can anyone watch that guy crying on the floor, begging them not to kill him, face down in a hallway?
Because he made this hand motion that's similar to a motion of reaching into your pants and pulling out a gun.
Yeah. Well, we were having fun and we were watching recently this excerpts from this amazing, legendary police training video from the 80s called Surviving Edged Weapons.
It was incredible.
It's a great movie.
It was so
shout out to Red Letter Media for introducing me to it. It is great. There's the entire thing and a 30-minute or
we watched the 30-minute
there's a 30-minute version on YouTube. It's worth watching. But the takeaway from this video for any cop is literally everyone is covered in spikes and wants to hurt you. Not even kill you. Like they're listing all of the knives. Things can be knives. Lipstick can be knives. Skis can be knives. Glasses can be knives.
A child could be a knife.
You could have razor blades in the back of your hat. But then they say things like, you could have barbed hooks and fish hooks in your pockets to catch your hands when you're patting someone down. So, okay, one thing to have a knife to maybe stab a cop and get away from him, but that's just going to make him mad.
No, yeah.
Why would you do that?
I don't know if you've ever been like patted down by a cop, but I was obviously like a solidly upper middle class white kid when I was like a teenager in Chicago. But of course, anytime I was with people who weren't white, like cops just like stop you if you're with a group of more than like four or like any weekend night, because it's just a way of passively or actively humiliating people without arresting them. And they'll write these they're not even citations. It will just be little sheets of paper that says that they took down your name in case you do something. But like me and my friends, once we were walking around like the Loyola campus and we were like 16. And there was this group of just like drunk fucking idiot like white law student kids from Loyola Law School. I hope it wasn't Chris Hayes, but they said something to us, and my friend said something back, and you do that 16-year-old thing where it's like, yeah, I'm going to fight a 24-year-old. I listened to the game. I'm going to win. Like squaring up, probably not going to do anything, about to walk away. And then this fucking unmarked narc car pulls up out of the alleyway, because we have alleyways in Chicago, because we respect the human right to piss behind a dumpster. But so, yeah, they threw like me and all my friends against the fence, of course, like threw my friends way harder. And we're saying shit like my friend had this stupid fucking fake grill, and he was like, I know you can't afford that shit. You're selling drugs. And it's like, no, he's not. He's like a fucking high school sophomore, like Jesus Christ. But they're just so in this mindset. And when they're patting him down, they're like, if you have anything that pokes me, you little piece of shit. It's like, they're 16. Why would do you think that they would be like Carl Panzram and just be like, I have a death wish against the world. I want to kill every man. I have an AIDS needle poking out of my fucking out of my Soulja Boy wallet. These fucking children, they think that they're Albert Fish or Panzram, and it's just a fucking sick mindset. They think the entire world is... I mean, it's the thought behind all fascism, that you're just under siege all the time. Well, that's especially from children.
If you want to change... I mean, Matt's right when he says that's the impossible standard of proof. And if you want to change that, you could either do it legislatively, which will never, ever happen because of how popular cop unions are and how everyone is frightened of cop unions, or you could try to get the Supreme Court to reverse their own decision from the 80s, which created that standard, which also won't happen.
I don't know.
Because these cases don't get appealed.
Any of you guys see Pelican Brief?
But beyond that, if you can't change that, I mean, you have to change at the very least the composition of the police force. And that man, that unrepentant murderer who murdered that guy, put 5-6 shots in him, and then stepped over his body to continue clearing this dungeon level of a fucking hotel, should not be a cop. I mean, he should obviously be at the
well,
very
he was
least,
fired.
He should at the very least be exiled from society. Well, he should have never been a cop to begin with.
Obviously.
That's the thing.
I mean, remember the record of the guy who shot Tamir Rice in half a second upon seeing him after riding right up to him.
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't have time. I had to do it. It was so close. Yeah, because you rolled right up next to the person, you maniac. But anyway, he had a record of basically cracking under pressure, crying on the job, erratic behavior. This is basically Barney Fife on meth. And he got kicked off one force, and then Cleveland's like, we'll take you.
Can we get cops to, like, instead of being cops, we can just give them a work program where they write first person essay mediums about like having social anxiety and being afraid all the time?
That's the thing. Society sociopaths should not go into the military or law enforcement, and we need some kind of make work bullshit for them, like just digging holes and then filling them up at the end of the day.
Yeah, they get
to yell at the holes.
They should be playing, like, they should be testing, like, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare 82, where they have to take out Kevin Spacey, who's in the last game.
But as long as the job description of U.S. police officer is what it is, it will attract sociopaths.
Oh yeah, because it's great. You have no qualifications. You just show up and you get a gun. You get to push people around. It's the easiest job in the world.
Yeah.
And you get immediate esteem.
So
your masculinity is validated.
Being a cop has to be different.
Yes, exactly.
To have a different cop. It can't just be a representation.
And that's
thing.
the essence of
it. Has to be a different job.
And that's the essence of pushing for police abolition. It seems like a pie in the sky idea, and people will obviously say, "Oh, well, what, people are just going to break laws then?" Well, no, it means that this current model of policing is just so decrepit and defunct that it needs to be scrapped and replaced with something totally different.
Like a thing that could replace it would be so much different from it that calling it we'll still police is misleading, and it limits your horizons of how you're going to try to think about reforming and changing it.
And that has to happen sooner rather than later, because obviously as we careen towards ecological catastrophe and past the point of no return and inequality, incidents like this are just going to happen more and more.
Absolutely.
I mean, at the very least, can we just take their guns away?
Seriously.
I mean, at the very
there's all these.
You can still have mace and batons and shit.
Well, there's
And
all
granted,
these-
like then it'd be like, oh, well, the criminals will have guns, and then it's be like, well, some of them you're gonna have to let go.
Yeah.
you know. But like, what's currently happening now is so fucked up that I can't imagine it would be much worse.
Well, that's the thing is you get these guys who insist, oh, so you want a world where only the cops have guns, you sheep? Like, no, the cops would not have guns either in this fucking scenario, you fucking moron.
Yeah, everyone would have-
like that's liberal gun control literally is, we're going to disarm the entire population, but cops are going to have
Right.
We love our
bazookas.
cops, our law enforcement.
That is an insane double standard that is not tenable. It'd have to be, it's like nuclear disarmament.
Mm-hmm.
It would have to be mutual. It would have to be complete stand down and not some partial thing where you still have these incredibly abusive state authorities running around with licenses to kill.
It's like my view of nuclear disarmament, which is everyone but Iran. And everyone else also has to get rid of their militaries.
but
and
you get to have guns.
I get
personally,
to. Well,
Felix.
I'm
Me,
actually.
him, Hezbollah, IRGC.
Well,
They get to
You
actually-
get to have a Barrett 50 cal in your apartment in Greenpoint.
I will be known as. I'm not going to butcher the Japanese pronunciation, but it's called the circumcised samurai, and everyone will be dueling in light blades. And when I see a cop and they're like, why you can't afford that hat that says Mr. Condom on it, you're under arrest. I'll dare them to a light blade duel, and that's my better world.
This is a good segue. I mean, this is a hard segue because this is such a very serious and really hard thing to talk about and discuss. But we did talk about envisioning a world where cops don't have guns. And they can't inflict their violent will on crowds full of people. I'm going to switch now to a story that may make us all question our beliefs about law enforcement.
I believe that
guns,
there
and
should be ED 209s running around with that just are the guns are just on.
I'm not
They're
talking
never
about.
off.
I work for Doug Jones. Doug Jones, Alabama Senate. No, I'm switching to let's have a bit of fun now. And I selected a story here for this week that I selected purely to trigger Matt. So I'm pressing the button that will start his Ativan drip.
Oh, boy.
Matt, I know that you have a lot of feelings about Team 10 and me as a member with Andrew and Branson. I know that we disagree.
You're getting ahead. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm going to read now from New York Magazine's account of the Jake Paul pop-up store in New York City that happened
fuck
this
me.
week. Jake
Fuck.
Paul YouTube sensation.
I'd say like a triple threat because he can be on YouTube, he can be on Twitter embedded video, and he can be on Instagram. I call him a triple threat because I've threatened him 3 times unless he becomes my best friend.
So I'm just going to start reading from this. Is New York Magazine's account of Jake Paul did a pop-up store. I don't know what the fuck he was selling, just his merchandise.
All right,
And
you need to let me know. I need the context. I've heard of this person, and he has a brother named Logan, right?
yeah, and they were the ones who they had they
And
moved
they had
into
the
a
party
house in
house
LA,
in
and
LA.
they turned an entire neighborhood in LA into just teen party.
Right.
He has a dad named Rand.
Yeah. It was the
Epic prank, tackling my dad off a lawnmower.
what are his videos like? What are the YouTube videos actually are? What is it? Is it skits?
Oh man, he has this great.
Is it rap?
He has this
What is it?
He
great
raps,
rap
he does
song
skits,
called.
he does pranks. Felix, just describe some of his videos.
Okay, so like a prank would be like, yo, okay, so we told my boy, so one of his friends is named Nick Compton and or Compson, and in their rap song, it's every day,
Maury
bro.
Compson.
He goes, England is my city, and so a typical prank would be that he gets Nick, and he's like, hey, yo, Nick, they're repossessing your car. And Nick's like, oh, bloody hell. And he runs into the driveway. But they're not doing it. His car is fine. And it's like, oh my God,
Okay,
that's
this
a
guy-
good prank.
this guy deserves everything good
Or
in
like
life.
another prank would be like, another prank would be like, yo, we just bought a new couch. What if I light it on fire?
Yeah.
And it's like, woo,
That's
got him.
very, very wasteful.
Okay, or maybe this will get more clear.
Okay,
as,
all right.
as I read from the
I
article.
just needed something in my head to think
Here
of.
we go. Are you filming me? I asked 10-year-old Daniel, whose front-facing iPhone camera was clearly trained on my
Sir,
face.
you do not have a right to film me. Jake Paul versus sovereign citizen. Am I being detained, bro?
Well, and then Daniel answers, yeah, of course, he said. I'm vlogging.
Woo!
Daniel, his dad, and 3 friends had been standing on a curb on West 37th Street in 30-degree weather for several hours, waiting to get into a pop-up store hosted by internet star Jake Paul and his social media incubator, Team 10.
Shout out to my team. I'm a member of Team 10.
Me.
So it says, I'm going to go down here. He says, I like that Paul has a Lamborghini, Daniel's friend Sophia, also 10, said. I like that he names his cars, 7-year-old Mia added. Each of the 4 kids was already decked out in Jake Paul gear, including Team 10 hooded sweatshirts and Paul's signature yellow-tinted aviator sunglasses, a.k.a.
Aviator?
Aviator sunglasses.
Oh, Matt, I really hope I get you for Secret Santa.
God damn, these little kids are like the worst little kids since the kids in the White Ribbon.
What is he selling?
They're content
And like the
creators.
White Ribbon, this is the generation that
Yes.
will go on to start World War
do World War
III.
III.
Sounds like someone's a little nervous about the young content creators nipping at his heels.
What are they selling at this pop-up store? Do they
Like
say?
literally hats that
Swag.
say squad.
hell yeah,
Admission
dude.
fee for the pop-up store.
Paul's young fans think their Lambo driving, prank pulling hero can do no wrong.
He can't.
Kids told me the
He's
Martinez
infallible.
twins, a set of Spanish brothers who recently pulled out of Team 10 after alleging they'd been bullied by
that's
Paul,
Menendez.
had nothing to complain about. Jake wasn't actually mean to them. They were just using Jake. He
That's
treated
right.
them like brothers. Paul has since apologized to the Menendez twins.
Oh, fuck. These
More
guys
than
are
half a
going to kill
dozen
someone.
kids told me they were inspired by Paul's relief trip to Texas following Hurricane Harvey. During the trip, Paul was mobbed by fans in the parking lot of a San Antonio Walmart, and emergency services and the fire department had to be called in to control the scene.
Guys, if you think about it, if Jake Paul had not been 3 years old during Katrina and like did like one of his rap songs called like Squad AF or Fam Life in the Superdome, George Bush would still be president and we would never have to suffer for Donald Trump.
Guys, I've realized this is the way that socialism will win in this country. The only way we're going to seize control from these vampires before the end of the world is if we do it very quickly and violently. And the only way to overcome the technological superiority of the American police state is with human wave attacks. And if we could somehow radicalize these social media fan children, like the Paul heads or whatever, if we could get their leaders replaced with people who said, charge the White House and kill everyone inside, they would fucking do it.
I think that Jake Paul has a lot of similarities to Ayatollah Khomeini. They both have a stunning charisma. When I look into their eyes, I just see the infinite wisdom of God translated through the flesh of humanity.
Here's
I would die for him.
Here's my
happily.
favorite quote here. He goes, he never gives up. He has a big
That's
spirit, and no matter if people hate on him, he fights back. Alex, the kid with the speaker, told me. They were likewise unfazed by his stunts, like lighting a large fire in his empty swimming pool, which prompted Paul's neighbors to complain to the city until the influencer moved out. He's Jake Paul. He can do that stuff. He's just a savage, another fan said. He's savage. I asked what savage meant to them. It means you're cool. More than cool. You're like crazy and lit all the time.
That's so
Wait
fucking
until these
cool.
kids hear about Trump.
Yeah.
Oh, God, yes.
He can
He's
get
got
you Big
swag.
Macs all the time.
Yeah.
He's
Imagine
swagging.
Trump is reading this article and he's like, I know how to get even above an amazing 45% approval rating. And he's going to come out like he's going to be wearing a hoodie and like a Supreme hat. And he's going to light Air Force 2 on fire in the Rose Garden.
So it goes on
It'd be
to just
cool.
like, it just goes
Frankly,
like,
I'm a savage, okay?
Prank killing Jared.
You know what?
That would get all
You know who needs to have a talk with these kids? Eric Paddock. So that he could be like, kids, I got to tell you about my brother. He was cool.
he was
had
lit.
swag.
He was savage AF.
Savage AF. He could do whatever he wants.
when people hated on him, he fought back.
He did the biggest social experiment in American history.
And then you're going to have thousands of kids being like, yeah, he was great. He was awesome. He was lit.
Yeah.
I mean,
he was a gambler.
It goes on to talk about, like Jake Paul shows up for 20 minutes and like this mob of tweens literally start crying and screaming.
Like the Ayatollah. That's what happened
exactly.
to the Ayatollah.
And then like one girl named Rhiannon, like the Fleetwood Mac song, says she spent easily $500 on Paul merchandise. Oh wait, no. Said, this is the mom is Rhiannon. She says she'd already spent easily $500 on Paul merchandise for her son.
That's fucking pathetic.
Every time
I've spent
something new comes out, he gets it. At least $1,000 between both my daughters, said another mother. I dropped at least $750 on merch.
Are they just like walking out of there with 15 swag hats on their heads?
These parents are fucking losers. I don't have kids. I don't have to make a budget. I've spent like just in this past month, I spent $12,000 on hats that say, Lit Fam, like Oxfam with the Oxfam logo. Support Jake Paul in his lawsuit against Oxfam to take their logo.
This is just the last little like the cap on this piece. It said, "Please let me give you my money." One mother yelled from the corral for people who decided to stick around.
She's the fry meme.
Despite being told they wouldn't be allowed to shop without tickets. Please.
Jesus Christ.
Jake Paul.
Real life
Fucking
fry
king.
memes running around.
Jake Paul is like, give me your daughters. Give them to me as tribute.
Jake Paul is
to my social media incubator.
Jake Paul is like
Yo, he rules, dude.
He's mod
He
dib.
rules.
He's got
No,
swag.
he rolls.
He's got swag. He's got litness. He's got attitude. He's
Savage.
got attitude for days.
He's a 5-tool player.
He's a
Yeah.
10-inch player.
I got it. If you wanna end the Jake Paul phenomenon, here's what you do.
I do. I very
No,
much
I
do.
don't.
Here's what you do.
No,
Here's
I
what you
don't.
do. Recruit every internet pedant to become a fan of Jake Paul, just like My Little Pony, and just destroy this entire community. So have half of the people waiting there are like 8 to 10-year-olds, and half of them are just people going, you're not a real Jake Paul fan. What
Yes.
about the Jake Paul did in
our-
episode 371?
When our child free goes to Jake Paul events, like with Harry Potter.
Yes, that's the secret. That'll be how we do it.
This disgusting fruit crotch grabbed its Lit Fam squad hat before me, and I waited 10 hours in the rain. No, or even better, like all the internet adult pedants become Jake Paul fans, and they're all fucking right-wing spurgs. So they're like, look at like articles on like IJR that like creeping SJWs and Jake Paul videos.
Jake Paul destroys Islam.
Imagine my surprise when Jake Paul, when the liberals tried to say that Jake Paul supported their point of view, and clearly Jake Paul knows the truth about the FBI statistics.
Yeah,
I forgot
and then the young girls will be alienated, and they'll go off and they'll smoke weed or whatever, and it'll be way better for everyone.
Come on.
Matt,
Protect Team 10.
protect Team 10. The Syrian Arab Army.
When Brady said about Felix, Jake Paul shield wall.
Yeah, that's right.
Jake
Shield wall,
Paul
baby.
phalanx. Okay, one more funny bit, and then we're gonna do an actual social experiment on Virgil.
We're going to light Virgil on fire.
No,
It's a
actually-
Jake Paul
No,
style
I didn't
prank.
agree to this.
No. We actually are. State one quick thing, and then we're going to do an actual real life social experiment with Virgil. We've been
yes.
planning this out. This is just one more thing from the New York Times account of Donald Trump. This was in the article talking about how he drinks 12 Diet Cokes a day.
Baller.
I like anything about his diet. It's always funny to me.
Always funny. Did you see that he got the 2 Big Macs a night, and according to Lewandowski, because they said on an interview, "Hey, are you worried about his health? That's a lot of fat." And he goes, "Oh, he takes the buns off."
Oh, he's a paleo warrior.
But the idea of eating a Big Mac
It's
without a
disgusting.
bun is the
It's
most
disgusting.
disgusting thing I could imagine. Those little dime-sized patties with a bunch of shredded lettuce.
That's what
What
Donald
the
Trump.
fuck? Are you eating it with a knife and fork?
That's what Donald Trump's nipples look like now. Just sort of grayish brown meat. There has to be about 7 pounds of like fucked up McDonald's lettuce caught in between Trump's tits and stomach. When you open it up, it's like when you have like a basement with kind of porous walls and rats come in and can't get out. Just this smell of dying rodents.
Yeah, I'm convinced that they put it in a blender for him, and he just drinks a Big Mac shake
I would love to.
while screaming at fucking Brian Kilmeade, who I realized is the Cardinal Richelieu of the 21st century. The man with the ear of the most powerful sovereign on earth is Brian fucking Kilmeade.
This is what I want to talk about.
He's a savage. Brian Kilmeade's a savage. He's squad.
He's lit all the
He's
time.
on Team 10 too.
This is just one paragraph here. I got to read it because it's so great. It says here, but he is leery of being seen as tube glued, a perception that reinforces the criticism that he is not taking the job
Do they
seriously.
mean his intestines? He
Tube
swallowed
glued,
3
yeah.
tons of Elmer's.
Because on a recent trip to Asia, the president was told a list of 51 fact-checking questions for this article, including one about his prodigious television watching habits. Instead of responding through an aide, he delivered a broadside on his viewing habits to befuddled reporters from other outlets on Air Force One heading to Vietnam. I do not watch much television, he insisted. I know they like to say, people that don't know me, they like to say I watch television. People with fake sources, fake reporters, fake sources. But I don't get to watch much television, primarily because of documents. I'm reading documents a lot. Later, he groused about being forced to watch CNN in the Philippines because nothing else was available. I love the statement. I can't watch much TV because of documents.
Yeah.
Because I'm reading documents. That's like what a teenager would say to their mother about, like, are you really studying in your room? You're not watching TV, are you? No, I'm reading documents, Mom.
Yeah. Or she says, hey, I've heard something crinkle when I was making your bed. What is underneath the bed spring? Documents. Just some documents.
The things that my mom always says to me when I'm back home, like, why are the lips on your Jake Paul poster worn out?
Okay. I just needed to check in on our big wet
Our
president.
big
Our big
wet boy.
president.
Our big wet screaming idiot oaf president.
Okay. Listen. Okay. Now we're going to do a real life science experiment.
Hell yes.
With a human guinea pig.
Well, okay, explain the rules
Okay.
first.
Okay. Here we go. This is the water test we're going to do right now. The ice water test.
Yeah, we're going to do some ice water testing.
Arranged in front of Virgil are 3 identical glasses containing water. The background to this is Virgil's refusal to drink tap water, even when his throat is parched and he's wheezing and coughing.
I don't do tap.
He said he doesn't like tap water because even New York City's tap water, which I feel as a
Famous.
partisan,
One of the only good parts about this city.
I love New York City tap water. I drink it all the time. It's my favorite water. Virgil claims that tap water it doesn't taste good enough for him. It doesn't sting his palate with enough flavor. So I'm fascinated by this, and we are actually going to do a real water taste test.
Yes.
There are 3 glasses of water here, Virgil. 2 of them are bottled water.
Yes.
One of them is tap water.
And what is deadly acid?
One is Fiji and one is smart water,
Yeah.
correct?
I'm one of the only people who I'm probably the only person on the show who believes that Virgil will tell the difference. I know we've written hundreds of pages together. We've spent thousands of hours watching videos of Ron Fournier. I know his habits. I know how he thinks. We're married.
All right, here we go. This is the Virgil water,
off, King.
the water genius taste test.
Virgil,
here we go.
you're a savage. I believe in you.
Don't say anything until you've had
Yeah,
all
sample
3.
all 3, and then I want your responses. He has just sipped. He has just sipped the glass labeled A.
He looked up into the sky and pensively.
Shut up.
All right. He's sipping B right now.
You are slaying right now.
Rolling it over in his palate.
You're a fucking queen. I love you.
Okay. He's going for the last one. C.
Go off, King.
Would you like to go through again, or are you ready to render judgment?
Confident, first of all, that C is the Fiji water.
Okay.
A and B, however. A is the smart water, C is the Fiji water, B is the tap water.
Virgil, C was the tap water.
What?
No! He
No!
said Fiji was the most recognizable.
No!
And that was the tap water.
Which one was the Fiji
Yes!
water?
Yes!
Which one was the Fiji
B
water?
was Fiji water.
The one you said was the tap water. This is amazing.
This is bullshit. That's not Fiji water. This is bullshit. This is a
We all
shanda.
watched it.
This is a shonda. This is a setup. This is a goddamn setup.
I don't know what to
can
believe
verify
anymore.
he
I don't
watched-
know what to believe anymore. Ever
Chris
in
saw
my
it.
life.
Felix is on your side. He said you were
No.
going to win, and he saw
No,
it too.
that's impossible.
It is. Yes.
This is
you
are
God.
drinking unfiltered
I
New
am
York
the most-
City tap water
Oh,
straight
yes.
out of my kitchen
I'm
faucet.
so I'm happier than I've ever been right now.
the impurities.
This is the best day of my life. This is the best day of my life.
Water
Yes.
Cut this whole segment. Take this out of the show.
Water test.
When
fail.
he said C is the Fiji water, I had to bite my fucking tongue. I was so excited.
Oh, so there you have it, folks.
Yes.
Well, if I'm wrong about that, what else might I do?
Yeah. Makes you think. Speaking of which,
right, one last bit of business before we end. We're recording this on Sunday.
Tuesday.
Tuesday is election time.
Yeah.
Between I work for Doug Jones.
Doug Jones!
of OCP.
And the theocratic cowboy pedophile.
Roy
Moore.
Macklemore.
As you know, Matt and I have a gentleman's wager
Indeed.
that the loser of this wager has to touch a poop. And earlier we said, and this was a couple weeks ago, Matt said Roy Moore would win. I said Doug Jones would win. Matt, do you want to give your final prediction? Your
Well,
final,
I mean, I
final
thought,
margin call.
I thought we were just picking winners.
Well,
and I thought that we had this
that
locked
will be
in.
the bet, but for fun.
And I thought we had this locked in. But I will say Roy Moore
is
will
locked
win. Roy Moore will win by 4 points.
Interesting. Because I've thought about it, looked at the polls, did my little on the ground analysis, and it's a toss up. It's up in the air,
Tie goes to GeoHell.
but well, it can't tie. But I'm going to say, and this is bold, I'm going to say Jones by 4.
Whoa.
Okay.
All right,
All right, there you have
My
it.
final. That is my lock of the week.
Is that your final answer?
I'm going to say Jeff Flake wins the write-in campaign.
All right. Now, I just a note on the wager. I was the I am administering. What's at
turd.
stake here? The poop. Right. And I want to be clear here. I'm going to slightly alter this in a way. I'm giving options here. The loser of this bet can touch a piece of poop supplied courtesy of my new friend Marty. He's been supplying it quite regularly. You can touch it, and I mean like just touch with one finger for 1 second. Like, just touch a poop. You can do that. Or I'm giving an option here to the loser. They can, for the good of the show, touch intellectual poop and read either a book by Erik Erikson or alt-right professor Jordan Peterson. And then your punishment will either be touching poop or reading an awful book that I give you and doing a book report on it for the show.
What is Peter Peterson write?
Jordan Peterson has a book called like the 12
The logic of
the 12
argument.
logic
The
rules
12
of-
logics
yeah.
of power.
The
or
12
something.
logic commandments. Don't get ad on your own hominem.
And then Erik Erikson's book is like about it's like a letter to my kids for after I die.
Because my
soon.
heart is the size of a canned ham and it's going to explode at any minute.
Well, Matt, you don't have to decide now.
Yeah.
No, we'll decide later.
Erik Erikson's body type is Pusheen.
I get that now, goddamn. Thank Virgil for that one.
Okay, so we understand the stakes. The election is going to happen on Tuesday. We will know, and we will be back to record on Wednesday.
One other thing. This Tuesday, Matt and I have said tentatively that we will Periscope ourselves watching the
Yes.
results as they
I'm looking
come in.
forward to
Oh,
that.
excellent.
That will be
that'll be
Oh,
fun.
and one last bit of show business before we leave. Reminder to subscribe to our newsletter.
We've got a newsletter.
The newsletter is very fun and good, and we've gotten very good feedback to it. Subscribe to the newsletter. Link will be in the show
News
info.
and views.
One more thing. I earlier in the episode made a reference to a character in the James Ellroy novel. If you caught it, please DM me for a reward.
Oh, I missed that.
I'll say
Okay, all right.
afterwards.
All right.
And one last thing. Donald Trump never told his kids, "Would you, if they jumped off a bridge, would you do it too?" He said, "If they read a book, would you do it too?"
Oh, and